The silence of the night was broken by the crash of splintering wood. At exactly 2:07 a.m., a loud bang echoed through the small suburban house where Angela Brooks was sleeping soundly. She jolted awake, her heart hammering, confusion flooding her mind. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, until she heard heavy boots pounding against her living room floor. "Police, stay where you are," shouted a voice. But Angela hadn't even moved yet. She sat frozen on the edge of her bed, staring at her door as it burst open. Flashlights cut through the darkness, blinding her. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. She wasn't a woman easily shaken, but no one expects their front door to be kicked in at such an hour. The officers stormed her bedroom, weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them," one barked. Angela slowly lifted her hands, eyes narrowing as fear turned into anger. "You've got the wrong house," she said, trying to keep her tone steady. But the cops weren't listening. One of them began searching through her nightstand, while another pulled open her closet door. Angela's breath caught. Hanging inside, neatly pressed and framed in clear view, was her dark navy FBI field jacket. The letters were unmistakable: FBI, bold, golden, authoritative. The room went quiet. The officers exchanged nervous glances, their earlier confidence faltering. Angela lowered her hands slightly, her gaze unflinching. "You broke into the wrong woman's home," she said coldly. The silence that followed was deafening. The men who had stormed in like hunters now looked like trapped prey. Their guns wavered, and their eyes darted to the jacket that told them everything they needed to know. Angela Brooks wasn't just any woman. She was someone they should have never crossed. The tension was so thick it seemed to swallow the air. Angela's eyes didn't leave the trembling flashlights. The officers stood frozen, their earlier aggression slipping away the longer their gaze lingered on the FBI jacket. One officer, a tall man with a shaved head, cleared his throat. Ma'am, we had a call about suspicious activity at this address." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the confidence he had just minutes ago when he kicked in her door. Angela lowered her hands fully now, her voice sharp. "Suspicious activity? At 2 in the morning? Did that justify destroying my door and pointing loaded weapons at me in my own bedroom?" Another officer shifted uncomfortably. He looked young, rookie, Angela thought instantly. He muttered, We thought this was the right place." Angela rose from the bed slowly, deliberately. Her presence was commanding, though she wore nothing but a t-shirt and sweatpants. She walked over to the closet, brushing past one officer, and gently pulled the jacket from its hanger. She held it up, letting the golden letters shine under their flashlight beams. "Read it," she ordered. The rookie's lips parted. "FBI." "That's right," Angela snapped. "I'm a special agent with the Bureau, and you just committed unlawful entry, destruction of private property, and threatened a federal agent. Do you have any idea what that means for your careers?" The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Angela's broken front door creaking in the hallway. The officers looked at each other, panic settling into their eyes. The reality of what they had done was beginning to sink in. Angela folded the jacket over her arm and narrowed her gaze. "Now," she said, her voice low but cutting, "you're going to explain exactly why you're here." Angela stood tall, the FBI jacket draped over her arm like a badge of judgment. The officers shuffled uneasily, their flashlights now hanging limply at their sides. None of them dared to meet her eyes. Finally, the shaved head officer, clearly the one in charge, cleared his throat again. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call. Anonymous tip. Said there were drug deals happening out of this address. We're just following protocol." Angela's lips pressed into a thin line. "Protocol," she repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. "Protocol doesn't mean smashing into a house without a warrant. Protocol doesn't mean terrorizing an innocent citizen, let alone a federal agent." The younger officer stammered. We thought." "You thought wrong," Angela cut in sharply. "You barged into my home at 2 in the morning without verifying a single fact. Did you run the address through dispatch? Did you even confirm the ownership of this house before you kicked down my door?" Silence. Angela shook her head slowly, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. "Of course you didn't. You just wanted action. You wanted a raid. And now you've stepped into something far bigger than you realize." The tall officer tried to salvage authority. "Look, mistakes happen. If you're really FBI, then you understand how these things go. Angela stepped closer, her glare sharp enough to slice through him. Don't you dare lecture me about how these things go. I train law enforcement officers like you. I know the difference between a mistake and reckless incompetence. What you did tonight isn't just a mistake, it's a violation. The rookie swallowed hard, sweat beading at his brow. The weight of her words and the jacket in her hand made the reality undeniable. They weren't in control anymore. Angela was. Angela set the jacket gently on the bed, then reached over to her nightstand. With steady hands she opened the drawer and pulled out a small leather wallet. She flipped it open, revealing the unmistakable gold badge and ID card of a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The flashlight beams landed on it, and the room went dead silent. "Special Agent Angela Brooks," she said, her voice sharp as steel. "Counterintelligence Division, badge number 4176. Her eyes lifted, pinning each of the officers in place. "Now tell me again, what authority did you think you had to enter this house?" The rookie's lips trembled, and he lowered his weapon entirely. The officer with the shaved head clenched his jaw, his confidence unraveling with every second. We didn't know." "Exactly," Angela said coldly. "You didn't know. You never checked. You stormed into a federal agent's home in the middle of the night, waving guns around like you were in some bad movie. Do you have any idea how many laws you just broke?" One officer muttered, almost in a whisper, "This is bad." Angela snapped her badge shut and slipped it back into the drawer. "Bad doesn't begin to cover it. Do you realize that I could have fired on you the second you broke in, and I'd have been fully within my rights? You're lucky I didn't mistake you for criminals." The rookie's face turned pale at the thought. The leader stepped back, his authority crumbling. "Agent Brooks, please, let's talk this through. Maybe we can work something out." Angela folded her arms, her stare unrelenting. "Oh, we're going to talk, but it won't be with me. It'll be with Internal Affairs and the Bureau." Angela's patience had run thin. She walked past the trembling officers, brushing shards of splintered wood from her hallway floor as she reached for her phone on the kitchen counter. The clock read 2:21 a.m. The silence between them was broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the nervous shuffle of boots behind her. She dialed a number with practiced precision. The rookie exchanged a wide-eyed glance with the others, whispering, "She's really calling someone." Angela spoke into the phone, calm but commanding. "Director Harris, apologies for the late hour. We've got a situation. Local PD just forced entry into my home without a warrant. Yes, 3 of them, still standing here." She paused, listening, her eyes never leaving the men in her kitchen. The officers paled further at the name. Director Harris wasn't just anyone. He was their regional FBI field director. "Yes, sir. I'll hold them here until your team arrives," Angela continued, her tone icy. "I expect Internal Affairs to be notified. This cannot be swept under the rug." She hung up and placed the phone gently on the counter. The silence pressed in again. One officer broke it, his voice cracking. "Look, we didn't mean harm. It was an honest mistake." Angela turned on him with a glare so sharp he fell silent. "You don't kick indoors at 2 a.m. because of an anonymous tip. You don't pull guns on a sleeping woman. And you don't call it a mistake when you trample over the Constitution," the rookie whispered, almost pleading. "What's going to happen to us?" Angela folded her arms. "What happens next depends on how honest you are in the next 15 minutes. The Bureau is already on its way." 15 minutes dragged like an eternity. The 3 officers stood stiff in Angela's kitchen, their flashlights turned off, their guns holstered, their bravado gone. Angela leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her FBI jacket now resting on the chair beside her. At exactly 2:38 a.m., the sound of approaching engines shattered the uneasy silence. Headlights cut across the street outside. Multiple black SUVs rolled up, their movements crisp and calculated. Doors opened, and within seconds, a squad of agents in tactical gear advanced toward the house. The officers shifted nervously, their faces drained of color. The rookie whispered, "Oh God." The door, already broken, creaked wider as Special Agent Ramirez entered, flanked by 2 others. He spotted Angela instantly and nodded. "Agent Brooks, are you all right?" Angela's jaw tightened. "I'm fine, but my front door isn't. These 3 thought it was acceptable to raid my home based on an anonymous tip." Ramirez's eyes flicked to the officers. His expression hardened. "Names?" The shaved-head officer stammered. Sergeant Miller. These are Officers Blake and Turner. Sir, this isn't what it looks like. It looks like you kicked in a federal agent's door, Ramirez cut him off coldly. At 2 a.m, without a warrant, without probable cause. He stepped forward, towering over them. Do you have any idea what kind of storm you just walked into? Blake, the rookie, looked like he was about to collapse. We didn't know she was FBI. Angela finally spoke, her voice sharp. That's the point. You didn't care to know. You wanted an arrest, not the truth. And now the truth is here. Ramirez turned back toward the agents behind him. Cuff them. Internal Affairs will take it from here. The officers froze, eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time that night, it was their freedom on the line. The clink of handcuffs echoed sharply in the kitchen. Sergeant Miller tried to pull his arm back, but Ramirez's men were relentless. Within seconds, all 3 officers had their wrists bound tightly behind their backs. The power shift was undeniable. Those who had stormed in as aggressors now stood as detainees. This is insane, Miller barked, his voice filled with desperation. We were just doing our jobs. Angela stepped forward, her gaze cold and steady. Your job is to protect the law, not break it. You barged into my home without a shred of probable cause. You terrorized me in the middle of the night. That's not policing, that's reckless abuse of power. Officer Blake, the rookie, looked down at the floor. His voice was barely audible. I didn't want to kick the door. I told him we should wait for backup, but he insisted. Angela's eyes narrowed. So you followed an unlawful order instead of standing up for what's right. Her voice softened slightly, not with sympathy but with weight. That makes you just as guilty. Ramirez's men began escorting the 3 toward the broken doorway. Miller dug in his heels. This is a mistake. You can't do this. We're the police. Ramirez leaned close, his tone deadly serious. And she's the FBI. That means you don't just answer to her. You answer to federal law. And tonight, you've broken it in more ways than one. Angela stood tall, her arms folded, as she watched them being led outside into the flashing lights of the Bureau SUVs. Neighbors peeked through curtains, catching glimpses of the very officers who once strutted through their streets, now humiliated and cuffed. Angela exhaled slowly. Tables have a funny way of turning, she murmured, and tonight they had turned completely. By 3:15 a.m., the officers who had stormed Angela's home sat inside a stark interrogation room at the Bureau's local field office. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on their anxious faces. The adrenaline that had fueled their reckless raid was gone, replaced by dread. Sergeant Miller sat rigid, his jaw clenched in defiance. Officer Blake, the rookie, fidgeted nervously, sweat beading on his forehead. Turner, the 3rd officer, stared silently at the table, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The door opened, and Angela entered, no longer in her t-shirt and sweatpants, but in a crisp suit. Her badge hung at her hip, her posture radiating authority. Behind her stood Ramirez, arms crossed, his expression stone cold. Angela placed a file on the table and sat down. She let the silence linger before speaking. You broke into my house without a warrant. You pointed guns at a federal agent. That alone could end your careers. But I want to know why. Who gave the order? Miller finally snapped. We had a tip. Dispatch said this was the address. We thought we were stopping a drug deal. Angela leaned forward, her eyes piercing his. A tip from who? Do you have a case number? An official report? Or did you take an anonymous call and run with it because you wanted action? Blake swallowed hard. His voice trembled. There wasn't a report. It was a phone call. I told Sergeant Miller we should verify it first, but he said we didn't have time. Angela's lips curled in a grim line. So you ignored procedure, and you nearly destroyed more than just a door tonight. Miller's face reddened with anger, but he stayed silent. Angela knew she had them pinned. Now it was only a matter of unraveling the truth behind that so-called tip. Angela opened the file she had brought in. Inside were phone records pulled within the last hour by Bureau analysts. She slid a page across the table towards Sergeant Miller. This is the 911 call you claim justified breaking into my home. Miller frowned, scanning it. His face stiffened when he saw the originating number. Angela's eyes narrowed. Recognize it? Miller said nothing, but Blake leaned forward. His eyes widened. That's an unlisted number from our precinct line. He looked at Miller, shock in his voice. Sergeant, that came from inside? Angela's voice was low, precise. "That call didn't come from some anonymous citizen. It came from one of your own. Someone wanted you at my door tonight." Turner finally spoke, his tone bitter. This was a setup. Ramirez stepped forward, slamming a hand on the table. "Who ordered it?" Miller shifted in his chair, his defiance cracking. I don't know. The call came through dispatch. They said it was urgent." Angela cut him off sharply. "Don't play dumb. Someone inside your department targeted me. Either you're part of it or you're the most reckless sergeant I've ever seen." Blake looked between them, his nerves unraveling. "I swear I didn't know. I thought it was just a routine call. I didn't know it was Agent Brooks's house until we saw the jacket." Angela sat back, studying them. "The Bureau will dig until we know exactly who placed that call. And if I find out any of you had even the smallest hand in it, you won't just lose your badges, you'll lose your freedom." The room fell into heavy silence. The truth was clear. This wasn't a mistake. It was a setup, and now Angela intended to find out who wanted her silenced. The silence in the interrogation room was suffocating. Angela's eyes stayed locked on Sergeant Miller, watching every twitch of his jaw, every flicker of guilt in his eyes. She could feel it. He knew more than he was saying. "You've got one chance to tell me the truth," Angela said, her voice low but dangerous. "Who sent you to my house?" Miller shifted uncomfortably. I was told it was a high-risk narcotics bust." "That's all." Angela slammed her hand on the table, making Blake flinch. "Don't insult me. The call came from your precinct's unlisted line. Someone inside your own department orchestrated this. Now either you name them, or the Bureau charges all three of you with armed assault on a federal agent." Miller finally exhaled sharply. "It was Captain Rowe," he muttered. "He told me there was a tip about your address. Said it was confidential. Said we had to act fast before you left." Ramirez's brow furrowed. "Captain Rowe?" Angela's stomach tightened. Rowe was no random officer. He was one of the cops she'd investigated 2 years ago during a federal corruption probe. She'd testified against his partner. He'd escaped charges but lost a promotion. Of course, this wasn't about drugs. This was revenge. Angela stood, the chair scraping against the floor. "Get me everything on Captain Rowe," she ordered Ramirez. "Every call he's made tonight, every text. I want his location pinged." Miller's head dropped, realizing he'd just sealed his captain's fate. Blake looked stunned, Turner pale. Angela moved toward the door, her silhouette sharp under the fluorescent light. "You came to my house thinking you were hunting a criminal," she said coldly. "Turns out you were the ones being used as pawns." And now she would bring down the man who tried to frame her. By 4:05 a.m., Angela was back in the command center of the FBI field office. Monitors glowed with real-time data, agents typing furiously as they pulled records. Angela stood at the center, arms folded, her sharp eyes scanning every update. "Agent Brooks," Ramirez called, handing her a printout. "We traced the call. It originated from Captain Rowe's office phone. Timestamp matches exactly when the false tip was logged." Angela skimmed the sheet, jaw tightening. So he didn't even bother to cover his tracks. That's arrogance or desperation. Just then, a live feed popped up on one of the monitors. Surveillance from outside Rowe's home. He was pacing his front porch, a phone pressed to his ear. "Patch me in," Angela ordered. The room filled with the sound of Rowe's agitated voice. No, it didn't work. They were supposed to bring her in, not call the feds down on us. Now the whole Bureau's breathing down my neck. Angela's lips curved into a cold smile. He'd just confessed. Ramirez gave a sharp nod to his team. "We've got him." Minutes later, black SUVs surrounded Rowe's house. Agents swarmed, weapons ready. Rowe froze on his porch, phone slipping from his hand as Angela stepped out of the lead vehicle, her badge gleaming under the streetlights. "Captain Rowe," she said, her voice cutting through the night. "You are under arrest for filing a false police report, abuse of authority, and conspiracy against a federal agent." Rowe's face twisted with rage. "This is payback, isn't it? You ruined my career once, now you're ruining it again." Angela's stare was ice. "No, Captain. You ruined it yourself. All I ever did was shine a light." As agents cuffed him, Angela felt the weight in her chest lift. But she knew this was only the beginning. Rowe wasn't working alone. Angela didn't relax as Rowe was led away. She knew better than anyone that a man like him didn't act alone. There were always others, people willing to bend the law for personal gain. Back at the field office, she convened a task force. "We need every communication Rowe had in the last 6 months," she ordered. "Emails, calls, messages, everything. I want a full mapping of his network." Analysts dove into the data. Within minutes, patterns emerged. Names and numbers appeared repeatedly. Officers, a dispatcher, even a few influential precinct figures who had motives tied to Rowe's past grudges. Angela's mind raced, piecing together the web of corruption. Ramirez approached quietly. "Agent Brooks, this is bigger than we thought. There are at least 7 officers directly involved in his schemes. Some are still on duty." Angela nodded. "That's why tonight mattered. If Rowe had succeeded, he could have compromised me or worse. We can't allow his network to remain active. We take them down carefully, strategically." She tapped a folder on the table. "Each officer will be questioned under supervision. Their communications will be monitored. We build airtight cases before we make any moves." A young agent asked nervously, "Do you think Rowe acted out of revenge, or is this just part of something bigger?" Angela's eyes hardened. Revenge was the trigger. But corruption like this doesn't exist in isolation. There's always a system. Our job is to dismantle it before it spreads further. She looked out the window at the quiet street where her home had been invaded. "Tonight showed me exactly how far they were willing to go. And tomorrow, they'll find out exactly how far I'm willing to go to stop them." The room fell into focused silence. Everyone understood the stakes. Angela wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was exposing a network that threatened the integrity of law enforcement. By dawn, the Bureau's command center buzzed with controlled urgency. Angela stood at the center of the operations room, flanked by Ramirez and a dozen agents. The whiteboard behind her was covered in names, phone numbers, and lines connecting Rowe's network like a spiderweb. "This is it," Angela said firmly. "We move at 0700 hours. Simultaneous arrests at all locations. No leaks, no mistakes." Agents nodded, their faces grim but focused. For weeks, Rowe and his allies had quietly abused their positions to target individuals they considered enemies, especially federal agents like Angela. Tonight's raid had simply blown their cover. Ramirez leaned close. "We've got warrants for all of them, dispatchers, street officers, even a lieutenant. They're not slipping away." Angela's eyes hardened. Good. They used the law as a weapon. Now the law will be used against them. As the sun rose, a fleet of Bureau SUVs rolled out, dispersing to different neighborhoods. Angela rode in the lead vehicle. Her mind flickered back to the splintered wood of her door, the flashlights in her face, the guns pointed at her chest. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for every citizen who'd been wronged by people in power. At 7:03 a.m., the operation began. Radios crackled as arrests were made across the city. In one precinct, an officer was dragged from his desk in handcuffs. In another, a dispatcher was escorted out mid-shift, stunned and pale. Back in the SUV, Angela's phone buzzed with updates. "Targets 1 through 5 secured," Ramirez reported. "All without incident." Angela exhaled slowly, relief and determination mixing in her chest. "Good. Keep moving. We finish this today." For the first time in hours, she felt the balance of justice tilting back where it belonged. By mid-morning, the operation was complete. All 7 members of Rowe's network had been apprehended, their homes and precinct offices thoroughly searched. The evidence collected was overwhelming: falsified reports, illicit communications, and documents showing deliberate attempts to target federal agents. Angela walked into the Bureau's press briefing room, the weight of exhaustion pressing on her shoulders. Cameras flashed as she adjusted her jacket, her FBI badge gleaming under the bright lights. Reporters whispered among themselves, hungry for answers. "Agent Brooks," a journalist asked, "how did you uncover this network?" Angela's voice was calm but authoritative. "It started with a violation of the law, my home being unlawfully entered. That incident exposed a larger pattern of corruption within law enforcement. Thanks to swift action by the Bureau, every individual involved has been held accountable." Another reporter asked, "Do you feel personally targeted?" Angela met their gaze steadily. "Yes, but this isn't about me. It's about the law and the principle that no one is above it. This network abused power to intimidate and silence. That will not happen again." Behind her, Ramirez gave a subtle nod, and Angela allowed herself a small, controlled sigh. Justice had been served. Rowe and his accomplices would face charges ranging from conspiracy to abuse of authority, with sentences that could reach decades in prison. As the crowd cleared, Angela returned to her office. She looked at the broken door that had been replaced earlier that morning. It was more than a repaired entryway, it was a symbol. A reminder that even when violated, justice could be restored through vigilance, courage, and unwavering adherence to the law. Sitting back in her chair, Angela reflected on the night's events. She had faced intimidation, aggression, and deceit, but she had turned the tables. Tonight, she had not only defended her home, she had defended the integrity of the Bureau itself. And that victory, she knew, would resonate far beyond her front door. Justice wasn't just a word. Tonight, it was reality.